anxious to step through the gate again, Major?
Yes, I am.
We all are.
Would you like us to bring back anything special?
No thanks.
Groceries, new outfit, flatware?
No, just yourselves in one piece, please. Dial it up. You safe.
Welcome to the Jumping Puddles podcast. Be sure to listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and or YouTube, and follow us at Jumping Puddles Podcast on Tumblr and Instagram, and Jumping Pud Pod on Twitter. If you want to support our podcast, please check out our coffee. Hi, I'm Sam, and with me are my fellow co-hosts, Tor and Ash.
Hey! And today we will be discussing the film that started it all, Stargate, in 1994. Professor Daniel Jackson teams up with retired Army Colonel Jack O'Neill to unlock the code of an interstellar gateway to an ancient Egypt-like world. They arrive on a planet ruled by Ra, who holds the key to the Earth traveler's safe return. Now, in order to escape from their intergalactic purgatory, Jackson and O'Neill, along with some military friends, must convince the planet's people that Ra must be overthrown.
Dun dun dun! We're here! We're doing it! We're finally doing it! The original Stargate movie, 1994.
Yep.
30th anniversary!
Yeah!
Well, I feel like we should do some little disclaimers here right before we start. Let's go around really quick and just sort of mention maybe our history with this movie. So I watched this movie after I had watched a little bit of SG-1. So I went into SG-1 about almost 4 years ago now, which is crazy. And I eventually realized, like episode 2 or 3, that I had missed something, that being the movie. And so I went back and I watched like half of it that first time. Or maybe I watched it in parts, but eventually I finished it. And yeah, and then here we are to record again. So that's my little brief overview with that movie.
For me, it's my history with this movie is a little bit longer, I think. I know that I watched it like way after I watched all of SG-1 and maybe even Atlantis. I don't even remember when I was told that there was a movie. But eventually I watched it. I don't remember the first time I watched it, but I've watched it a lot since then. I think at some point I kind of made it a thing to watch it every year on Stargate Day or something. So I watched it like, I don't know, something between 5 and 10 times in the meantime. Yeah. And I'm really excited to talk about it today.
Yeah, I love that tradition. I am the only one on the podcast who had never watched the original film in its entirety before, like ever, until we decided we were going to record this bonusode. It's funny, Sam, you kind of mentioned this when you were talking about your experience with the film, but when I watched SG-1, well, I watched Stargate all in the wrong order. Like, I watched Atlantis before I watched SG-1, and then I went back and watched SG-1. And when I went back and watched SG-1, I noticed that these characters clearly had an existing relationship, and that I was not privy to. And I was like, yeah, that's okay. Like, shows do that, right? And I just took it as, like, a normal thing. Knowing that the film existed in the back of my mind, but not really realizing that it was directly tied into the series. So now I know. And I was very excited to finally get to buckle down and watch this movie with some of my favorite actors of the time.
I think it's so funny that, like, in SG1, like, I get what they're trying to do, like, in those first few episodes, you know, like, mentioning the movie and being, like, all, like, tongue-in-cheek and being like, oh, we've done this before, or, you know, like, doing, like, the little hand signals, like, the military guys to be like, ooh, you know, like, callbacks, but I felt like such an idiot that first time, because, yeah, I was like, what the hell am I missing? I was like, I literally watched the first episode, I went to episode 2, I was like, what's happening here? And I literally think it was like after a few episodes that I was like, oh, I had to like look it up. I was like, why? What is happening here? And the internet was like, there's a movie, bitch. And I was like,
oh,
okay, be right back. I was like, let me get the context. And I watched it and I was like, you don't really need the context. Just for like completion's sake, I feel like you do. But I do think the show does a good job of just being like acknowledging it and like moving past it.
Yeah, because there are like quite a few differences. But it's, I think, like, I don't think you have to have seen all of Stargate to like get everything. But it's nice if you have, like the little, I think especially in Children of the Gods, so the first, like the SG-1 pilot, they're like probably the closest ties to the movie. But also it can be a bit confusing, or like, because they recast some actors and some they didn't, and like they changed a lot of the lore as well, or like expanded. But yeah, it definitely like for me, I watched SG-1 so like 14 years ago or something for the first time, so I was a child. I don't really remember like, and probably I didn't even get like, I didn't realize that I was missing a lot. But yeah, I think it's nice if you have like the context. But yeah, you don't. It's okay if you don't. But it's, yeah, I like the movie. I think, like, if you can, go watch it.
You know, I actually really want to hear from Tor first. Because this is your first time actually watching the whole thing in its entirety. What are your overall impressions? Give us how you feel. Tell us the tea.
All right. Well, immediately upon watching the movie, I understand why other writers would want to take this premise, this world that the director and writers built, and kind of make a go of it, like totally run with it. It was a fun movie for me. I really enjoyed Daniel. I really enjoyed Jack as characters, sort of leading the movie emotionally. I loved the visuals, and I think the visuals left the highest impact on me in terms of like a first time watch. The first scenes of the gate in particular are just so iconic. The desert, the pyramid ships, like, oh, it's just beautiful movie, beautiful colors. So, yeah, I was just kind of enthralled by the visuals the whole time. And there's not a lot of dialogue for the second half of the movie, I feel like, at least not intelligible dialogue to the audience. But I feel like the look of the movie carries that a long way.
Yeah, hard agree. I think the visuals is definitely just worth giving it a watch, just on the visuals alone, honestly. Just I think the spectacle is so amazing. And I think, you know, the adventure movie is sort of like a lost genre nowadays. Or like a genre that like maybe it still exists, but it just isn't as well done, I think, as it was before. Obviously you have like the famous sort of like Indiana Jones, The Mummy, like that sort of vibe, how they incorporate like history and archaeology into sort of like their mythos. And so I love that this movie's in the spirit of those movies. Do I think it is on the same caliber as those movies? No. I'm sorry to hate to break it to you guys. The script is questionable, but I just feel like I love what it's trying to do, and I love the premise so much. And yeah, I agree. I think no wonder they were like, "Hey, let's make this a TV show. Like, this sounds like it's gonna be a great franchise." And I think the show just improves on so many aspects of it, but I also think it does maybe pale in comparison to like the scale of the movie. So again, it's just nice to have both. It's nice to have the movie, and honestly, it's nice to have the show because I think they do different things like better than the other one.
Agree.
Yeah, you said that so well. Oh, like the show and the movie. That was really good.
Thank you.
It's funny because like I like the movie, but I agree very much with what you said about like dialogue. And I do love the visuals, just like you two. I think like the scenic shots are amazing. I think the costumes are great. The set design is fantastic. And I don't know, this movie, I think for me, it feels like a movie. And I like that it's, especially the first half, I feel like it's kind of slow, but I kind of like that. And the second half, there's so much happening, like so much like fighting and stuff. And funnily enough, that's a part where almost always, I think, kind of drift off.
That's fair.
During like the action. I don't know why, but it's always there where like, okay, I know this movie's still like 40, it's still gonna be like 45 minutes. What's happening in those 45 minutes? It's mostly fighting. So I think it's sometimes, okay, I did watch a long version, like there's a shorter and a longer version. So there's one, I think it's like an hour 45, and then one that's just about above 2 hours, I think. And maybe it's just a long version, but I'm not sure. But yeah, it feels a bit long at times. But I love the characters. I love Daniel so much. He's so fucking funny. I cannot, like, this man. He's so awkward, and I love him so much.
I love that you mentioned Daniel, because yeah, I really want to talk about the characters. So I like Daniel in this a lot. I think James Spader, you know what? I know he fucking hated this movie, but you know what? I think he did a great job. Actually, you know what? That ties into one of the behind the scenes I'll mention. Yeah, so reference, James Spader found the original script to be awful and still hated the revised version because he had only accepted the role for money, and he was like fucking miserable in the beginning. This is all in quotes. There was one day where he wouldn't come out of his trailer until we rewrote the scenes. Kurt Russell got very upset with him, and he burst into his trailer and said, "What are you doing?" And James said, "Come on, admit it, the dialogue is horrible." Russell said, "Of course it's horrible, that's why they pay you $1 million. If it was brilliant, you'd do it for free." End quotes. But according to the writer, he said that eventually the actors both embraced the science fiction and were pleased with the movie by the end. But it was definitely a struggle in the beginning.
$1 million? You got $1 million for this movie?
I feel like 90s is, or like $1 million, yeah, is like low. But I mean, maybe for the time, right? 90s.
Yeah. I think I read something that the movie had like a budget of 55 million.
It's low. I think just comparing it to like modern standards, I feel like that's kind of low, right? Because I feel like, I'm trying to think.
Okay, what would be like the modern equivalent of Stargate today? It's hard because all movies are like reboot and remakes. But
I was gonna say Dune, but that might be like, obviously it's a little silly comparison because it's like Dune is such like a yeah, I know, I'm so sorry. I just thought sand. I don't know, just because like I mean I guess you can compare it to like Star Wars, but like
no.
Okay, so we're talking like a modern sci-fi movie, $165 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 55 is like
low,
a third, basically.
Again, it's I mean, I guess when you think about it, right, it's not like that crazy because it's not like they had like many sets. It's basically like the SGC and then like the desert planet. And like all they had to mainly do was like the ships and like all that stuff. And like pay the extras. But it's still impressive, honestly, I think.
And despite not loving the dialogue, I feel like Spader and Russell did a great job of delivering lines that they didn't really believe in.
Yeah. I know. I think what I loved about, especially about Daniel, he was so in his own world. On Abydos, he was like the archaeologist, like the science guy among like all the military guys. But even aside from that, he was just like living like in his own little reality. And I don't know, I thought it was so cute, and the way he talked, and kind of funny, but also kind of awkward, but not really, not shy or anything. He was just like distributing his plans. But he was so, I don't know, I thought it was so funny, but so cute.
He's like, obtuse, I would want to say. Like, he's just kind of like, yeah, like you said perfectly, in his own world. Like, he's just like not registering. I feel like half the stuff that happens to him, and in a way, I just feel like, yeah, it makes him like so endearing. Because he's sort of like, he is like a nerd, like, you know, he's like being like made fun of for it, but he's not like changing himself. He's just sort of like, I don't want to say like maybe brushing it off, because I think some of it maybe does affect him, but he's just sort of just like, like he's just very much like, I literally don't care, like I'm just here to like be on an alien planet and like look up like cool culture stuff and like all that. Like even in the beginning too, when like everyone's leaving his lecture, he's just like, all right.
Yeah, and I feel like something about the spirit of adventure that he has in the package of a non-adventurer. Like, he is not the action hero archetype. However, he has the heart and soul of like a true explorer and adventurer. Like, he just kind of seems thrilled by everything he's getting to do in the film. So that's a very endearing quality, because he's surrounded by these military men who are so serious and like, we have a mission, doctor. And he's so like, oh, everything is cool and interesting, and it's such a nice levity to have in the film, for sure.
Yeah, and I think which leads me to the next main character, and I have a spicy hot take.
Ooh, okay. I want to hear.
Well, I guess it's not that hot, but I'm just gonna give a compliment, which I feel like might be like shocking to people. I'm gonna say something nice about Jack, guys. I actually think I prefer Richard Dean Anderson's version of Jack.
Interesting.
What?
Interesting.
To an extent. Let me clarify. To an extent. I think, we've talked about this. Everyone knows my opinion. I think that later seasons Jack just kind of falls off the wagon and sort of just becomes a caricature instead of a character. But I think early season Jack, I think, just has so much more, I think, to him. I don't know. I think Kurt Russell's version, I just feel like doesn't fit this tone. Or maybe it fit the tone of the movie, but I just feel like what they wanted to make Stargate was injecting that like fun and like humor, which is like what adventure movies are supposed to have. And I feel like, honestly, I think the movie Stargate kind of lacked a lot of that. And I think they tried to do it with Daniel, and Daniel is funny at times, or like his mannerisms and just things like that. But I just think there's like an element of like fun, like that's missing, in my opinion. And I think honestly a version of Jack that would have fit better would have been like his season 1, season 2 version of him, where he can be serious and he does get serious, but he's still like cracking jokes. And I think it sort of, I think, balances Daniel out at times too, because Daniel, again, he is funny, but I also feel like he's a very like we were saying, like no nonsense, sort of like head in the clouds. Like he's just not really like there at times. And so I just feel like having Daniel like all the way up here and like having the movie Jack all the way down there, it just doesn't really work, in my opinion. I think it's much better to have sort of both the characters maybe in the middle, and sort of have Daniel maybe get a little more upset at times, or or Jack is upset, or like Jack is funny then Daniel's funny, just a better mix, I think I would say. So surprise.
That's interesting, because I really loved like going back to like this Jack O'Neill after like having like discussing Jack in the last episode. like in our last episode. So I thought that was really fun, and it made me think about like his character and like his what makes Jack Jack kinda. And we don't really know like the exact timeline, but we know that like in the movie that his son killed himself, and it must have been pretty recently because they're like he and his wife Sarah are still living together. So it looks all very recent, and I think he was just a lot more depressed, which accounts for his like somber mood in the movie. And I guess I didn't really check if it fits like within the movie, but I was always thinking like already about the show, and I liked what this movie did in terms of like it's like not really a recovery, but also I don't know. I think it is in the movie, but I think I once read like a novelization of the movie, or maybe of SG1. I'm not sure right now, but it says very clearly that he didn't expect to come back from this first mission, and so it was basically his suicide mission, and then he didn't die, and he came back with like a new will to live, kinda, and that's when he like when they make the change to Richard Dean Anderson, and I really like that, and I really like that transition, and I felt like we had that, even saw it like a tiny bit, because like he did have some quips towards the end, maybe 2, and that was it, but like I think he got a little bit lighter throughout, and I like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think there was something really beautiful about the shell being cracked for Jack's character throughout the movie. And I think his journey in particular was the most satisfying one for me watching the film in terms of like an emotional arc, because it was kind of the only emotional arc in the film a little bit. But I love seeing the process of Daniel, and then Skaara, and like all of the people of Abydos kind of opening Jack up a little more to living again, until we reach that final scene of him and Daniel in front of the gate, and him being like, yeah, I'm gonna be okay, because of the experiences that he went through with those people. And there's something really beautiful about that connection, and I like how, the film kind of recontextualizes their relationship in the TV show for me, actually, because oftentimes I would be like, why are these two friends? Like, what is kind of the basis of their relationship? Like, why are they close? Like, why should I believe them to be close? And I think the film really makes it clear why they have a special relationship.
Yeah, I never really thought of it, I guess, in that way, but I think what I'm sort of maybe more stuck on is that, I don't know, it's just so different, I think, from other takes on the genre, which I sort of like and then I dislike, right? I feel like you have to just like give credit for like having such a like stoic main character in the beginning, and then like having him go on this like really emotional journey. I just feel like when you compare it like to other movies, or like The Mummy, you compare the main character there, and then you compare him to like Indiana Jones, or even like Luke Skywalker, or like Han Solo type of figures. I just feel like you usually have like that very like swashbuckling type of main character. So I think it's just interesting. I'm gonna say, like, I see both like the positives and the negatives that I think that like it adds something to the movie, but I also think it sort of like takes away. But like maybe that's just not the movie they were trying to make, but maybe it's just like a different tone than I would have gone for. But yeah, no, I can definitely respect and appreciate them for trying to do something different and trying to like make the main character have way more of an emotional arc than maybe some of these other movies do, and like stand out as well. But speaking of the only emotional arc in the movie, should we talk about what is her Sha're? No, it's the other one.
Is it
Sha'uri.
Yeah, that one.
I'm gonna mispronounce it every time.
Me too.
But yeah, how do we feel, lads?
Okay. I'm gonna bite the bullet on this one and just say it. When you have a film where your female lead, in quotation marks, cannot really communicate, it's difficult as a viewer to be like, this person has autonomy and this person has like feelings and is going through their own journey, and it's hard to like get attached to her outside of her connection with Daniel, which is tough for me personally. I liked her. I thought she was very sweet. And I liked the moments where she was very brave, like she wanted to be part of the fight and against Ra, and she protected Daniel from Ra, and I was like, you go, girl. But outside of those moments, I was kind of like, who are you? I want to know more about you. I don't know. How do you guys feel?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think it's just, I mean, okay, again, I get it in a way that these type of movies, like, sort of have to have, like, a love interest or, like, some type of, like, romantic angle. And I'm not complaining, girl. I love shipping. Girl, I love the romance. Give it to me in everything. I will eat it up. But, I don't know, it's not done well, in my opinion.
No.
I just don't think it's done very great. And not just like, I'm not talking about like just the romance. I'm just also just talking about like her as a character. I mean, she's very clearly just supposed to be like the sweet romantic interest who's like, she's nice. Like, isn't she pretty? Look, she's like, look really nice. And that's kind of like what her character is. And it's just really kind of unfortunate, too, because it's not like she's expanded very much in the SG-1 TV show, either. They're like, oh, isn't she nice? They're like, look, she's a brother. And then they're like, anyways, we're going to kill her 2 seasons in. They're like, Daniel doesn't need a wife. They're like, fuck it. They're like, we don't have to figure that out. Like, just kill her for man pain. And she dies for man pain in this movie, too.
Yeah, she does.
So they did her twice. She gets fridged twice. That's crazy. So yeah, it's not an aspect of the movie I really enjoy. I just think it's very paper thin, and they don't really add anything. I just feel like there's nothing engaging about it, unfortunately. I honestly think our most like engaging scenes are with like her dad and her brother.
True.
Like, that's where I'm like, okay, yeah, like, show me more about your life. Like, tell me about you. Like, how do you feel about all this? And, like, what are your thoughts about your family? And, you know, how are they feeling as, like, a unit having to experience this? But the movie's just not interested in really delving into that, which is, I'm not going to say fair, but to be expected.
I like her.
Yeah.
The whole thing with Daniel is, questionable, to put it nicely. Yeah, and I never thought about with her not being able to communicate with the main characters. I think that's the first, and I guess it takes a little bit away from her autonomy, but I do love her in the second part. Like, I do love that they learn, that they do figure out to, first of all, I love that they're forbidden to, like, draw and write, like, on all accounts, always. And, she still does it. She draws something in the sand, and I really, really like that act of rebellion, actually. I was like, okay, girl. And then later on, after like Daniel and Jack went back to the gate, I think, and she explains to the boys what's happening and that they should fight or something. Like there's one scene with them in the caves that I really like, and then also later that she's at least that she's with them and fighting with them, and I really enjoyed that. It's true that like her character isn't really expanded, but there aren't a lot of characters that are expanded. Like, I think you could argue that it's maybe the same level as her brother. But yeah, I think the things, like aside of Daniel's side, the things that she was allowed to do and that she wasn't like, I think I appreciated that she wasn't told to like stay home and not fight.
Yeah.
It was kind of nice to see because it's still rare, I feel like, sometimes.
Well, speaking of Skaara, yeah, I also just feel like when you compare, right, like what the show did with Skaara versus what they did with Sha're, it's like, Jesus Christ, you guys fucking hate women, huh? Yeah, they just tossed her ass out like she meant nothing. And yet Skaara gets like a super like, Jack is always like, you know, they see him every season and he's like, oh, now he's being taken over by the goa'uld, and then like, you know, it's like, oh, everyone's sad about it, like we have to get him out of it, you know. There's like that whole great like the judge episode or like the jury episode of trying to get him out, and then like he literally makes it till season 5, and then that's when eventually like they kill him off, you know. But it's like a very like different approach, I think, to the way they handled Sha're in the show. And so I feel like I am sort of like obviously biased because like I think that Skaara got like way more like development, and I just think emotionally like his story connects way more, or his story connects better honestly than Sha're's, just because they didn't utilize her very well. But I think that his relationship with Jack in the movie and the show is just so special and so sweet. And you know, that's when Jack's backstory sort of ties in, and I think Skaara means something to Jack. I think obviously both in the movie and the show. And honestly, I get sad sometimes that they killed Skaara off in the show so early, and it kind of felt like very like unresolved. Maybe it could have been something else for Jack, but I really like Skaara. I do, and I'm happy that they explore him more in the show because I think it's really interesting, and like what they do with both Sha're and Skaara is interesting. Mainly Skaara. Yeah, mainly Skaara.
I think I kind of forget in the movie, in the show, that they are siblings, because they're never again shown again. Like I literally just remembered that they're siblings, and it's, yeah, I mean they're both taken to be hosts. But from that point on, they're separated and have like completely independent storylines, and it's kind of terrible that they both experienced that fate, and they both had moments of clarity and outside of it, and Skaara even got his old life back, and Sha'uri didn't. But then that they never met again. It's kind of, it's really sad.
I was like, does he know? Did they tell her? They tell him, right? That like she's gone. They have to.
I honestly don't know. I need to rewatch SG1.
That's our sign. It's kind of hard to pick a character that is the emotional heart of the film, but I found, in a strange way, maybe, for me, Skaara was kind of the heart of the film, and in a way because he was such a catalyst, I guess, for Jack's character to kind of overcome his personal demons and that sort of thing, but also just for his own personal journey as well. I don't know, there were so many moments of the film that were touching in a strange way, him trying to emulate Jack smoking a cigarette, and it being unsuccessful, him hating it at the end was really kind of a sweet moment, and him wanting so desperately to join in the fight against Ra, and him and his friends, all these young boys, fighting for themselves and their families was really emotional for me and very impactful. The scene where he loses his friend, like, you get a sense of his connection to the other people of Abydos, and it makes him more of an emotional figure in the film. So I think for me, a lot of the movie's emotion really hinged on him and his performance. I'm not sure who the actor is, but he did a good job.
Yeah, and it's funny because he I feel like he does, or he gets what we've been a little bit criticizing about Jack and Dan. Like, he gets both, like, levity in his character and, like, fun and laughter, but also the opposite, like grief and pain and sincerity, and yeah, he's a surprisingly complex character. I feel like he didn't get that much screen time, I feel like, but yeah, he was there. I have one tiny fun fact about one scene. So in the scene where Skaara is smoking, the actor Alexis Cruz, he was talking about that scene. So when he is taking when Skaara is taking like a cigarette, and he like watches Jack smoke, and he copies him, and then he ends up hating it. It's really ironic because at that time Alexis was a chain smoker. So when he was saying that when his friends saw the scene, they all just made fun of him because, like, he had to play that he hated it and, like, couldn't smoke. Well, the opposite was true for the actor.
I love that. Acting.
Acting.
Yep. It's a magical thing.
It is.
Is there any... Oh my gosh, of course, I was gonna say, is there any other characters to talk about? Raw. Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Cunty? Look at this fucking diva! Oh my gosh! Sir! Jay Davison ate the fucking house boots down. Oh my god! He is so fucking good in this role. I'm obsessed.
Me too. Like, what the fuck?
Everything about it, I think, like, from the makeup, like, obviously, like, his, like, speech, too, and they even do, like, obviously, the voice a little bit, too. I don't know, like, he makes it work, and I think what's so interesting about it is that, so, originally, it was a pre-release screening, and the movie was, like, disastrous. Everyone fucking hated it. The percentage of the audience who liked the movie fell into the mid-30s. A reason why that people didn't like the movie that much is because Raw was just supposed to be, like, I don't know, he wasn't supposed to be an alien in the beginning. He was just like a slave or just something that was like, I don't know, it just wasn't like as clear. And so after that, they changed Ra into like an alien inhabiting a human body. And like they changed like obviously like his voice after they like made his like performance a little bit different. Because I think in the beginning, before when he wasn't an alien, he was just like, people weren't buying that this guy was like a threat. Because I mean, he's so like slender, right? He's just more like not maybe the typical villain you would see. And so when they changed to an alien, I think that really helped. And then after that, like all the test screenings were like super positive, and they were like, yeah, this makes sense that he's an alien. So I think he sort of goes under the radar, I think, at times, right? Because we're talking about like the main characters and like we weren't even mentioning him, but I think he's such a big part of this film, and I think he's such an effective just like presence, and he brings like a sense of like realism, you know, you like believe it that he could be like this alien baddie, you know, So yeah, I really enjoy his performance in this film.
Absolutely love him. Everything about him, I think. And I think one scene that I always think of is when he rips the necklace off of Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Sir!
Sexy!
Please.
Sexy!
Yeah, and I like what they did. Like, obviously they do it in the show as well, but his voice, like the way they changed his voice was especially, I don't know, cool.
Heck yeah.
I don't know, I think maybe because he was so hot. Sorry, I keep saying that, but he was! Like, he was like his androgyny. I don't know. It was, I don't know. It was kind of perfect. I felt it was perfect for the role, and yeah. I don't have a lot of thoughts about him because he's too beautiful. I'm sorry.
That's a compliment.
Yeah, absolutely. He certainly brought an ethereal quality to that villain. Like, I don't think Raw would have been as impactful if played by anybody else, because there's just something otherworldly and, like, mythical about him and the way he carries himself in this film. And it makes you buy the whole, like, eternal life, resurrecting with the sarcophagus shtick that the movie is trying to sell you, because, of course, when someone looks like that, you're gonna believe it, right? So, yeah, it was just really cool. I also found it so, unsettling and weird that, like, he had this entourage of, like, youthful children around him at all times. I was like, what? What is this? Are these, like, your next vessels? Like, I don't know, but it was very creepy and very peculiar and very affecting, for sure.
Yeah, and I really have to commend them for sticking with the bit for a while of the ancient Egyptian. I think what I heard is that they had actually, like, written it down on, like, huge signs and would have it, like, off camera so we could, like, read it. I think, obviously I'm not 100% sure Egyptologists were thrilled at the pronunciation at times. But you know, like, who cares? I appreciate the dedication.
But also, how do you know how they talked 8,000 years ago? Like, it's kind of debatable. Like,
that's true.
It's same with ancient legend. Like, people have their theories, but can't really know for sure. So
true.
You're like, take that. This is how you know Ash is down bad. She's going against, like, Egyptologists, and she's like, don't go against my man. Listen, he pronounced it just fine.
With that face, he can say anything.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think Ra brought such a unique presence. No, he is a unique presence among the rest of the goa'uld. Like, I think, I don't know, that's sort of like a different conversation, but I do think that the show unfortunately lost some of, like, the mystique around, like, the goa'uld and just, like, stuff like that. Obviously, I mean, I feel like you're gonna have to lose it to, like, delve into them more as characters and, like, as a society. But I don't know, I just feel like they lost that sort of magic around them. And I think that Ra just stands out among, I think, all the goa'uld, honestly, except for maybe Ball. I think Ball has, like, the most, like, Raw-esque vibes to him. But when you put him next to, like, Apophis, it's like, girl, respectfully. No offense to the actor, of course, of Apophis, but, like, it's just, like, night and day. And some of the other, like, goa'uld as well, I just feel like they played them so, like, upfront villainous, where I feel like Ra was just such, like, a great, like, I mean, he was villainous up front, but I feel like almost, like, schemy, almost, like, like a cat, right? I feel like very like cat mannerisms, which is like,
Yes.
okay, why am I bringing a cat into this? But like just like a cat mannerism, you guys can totally tell I got a cat. But I don't know. Again, I think Ball has that, and I actually think Katesh plays that a little bit in the Stargate movie Continuum. I have to, of course, give credit to my girl, Miss Claudia Black. She's gonna do it every freaking time. But yeah, so I just wish we had more of that type of energy into the goa'uld, because I do think, obviously, I mean, that's just like a whole other conversation of how the goa'uld overstayed their welcome. But I just think as a villain, I just think Apophis didn't bring that same energy, and I think the show lost something that the movie had established pretty well.
I think I disagree, especially with Apophis, especially Apophis in the beginning, because I totally agree that with time, like, the goa'uld would kind of just, like, same old a little bit. But I think Apophis in the beginning also slayed, and brought some of that, like, regalness, royalty, I don't know how you say it, into the character. But I think, not to derail this into a goa'uld discussion, but I think what the issue with the goa'ulds in SG1 is that they were demystified, and at some point, like, they acknowledge, oh yeah, it's true, like they don't acknowledge that they're not gods, but like it's really downplayed. I feel like they kind of like, yeah, they're still gods, but like, who cares? And here in the movie, they very much care because they very much believe in Ra as a god. And then SG1 starts the whole rebellion thing, the Jaffa rebellion, and of course it gets demystified. And I think I want to also add something about Ball. I love him as well, but I think he feels very different. He doesn't feel as otherworldly as Ra does. I feel like he's more of a character, and like, I think once he starts making like jokes, or like being more like, he even loses his cool voice, which I always miss it. Like, why did they get rid of that? It was so good. And it took away so much, I think, from the evilness, or like the distinctiveness of the goa'uld. And yeah, that's just my 2 cents about like the SG1 goa'uld.
Yeah, really quick. No, I think, you know what? I think you might be right about Apophis. I just think I'm probably always like colored by the fact that he like overstayed his welcome. I think maybe if I just look at it like season 1 and 2, or like the first like 3 seasons, maybe I'd be like, okay, yeah, like this was better. But I think the like killing him, then he's back, surprise, then he's back, and then he's back again. I just think that sort of, again, just like makes me see him in like a different light than I feel like I probably would have like held him in higher regard with some of the other goa'uld if he just hadn't been popping up like a freaking flea. But
Daniel Jackson of the goa'uld.
Yeah.
Also, I have a fun fact. You know the Eye of Ra that they like that Daniel has on like his necklace, and like that they reveal as a really big one. So actually, that's the Eye of Horus. I don't know. It's probably also like in the fun facts always, but like there's an Eye of Ra and an Eye of Horus, and the Eye of Ra is usually the right eye, or like most times it's the right eye, and it links to the sun because Ra is sun god. And the Eye of Horus is often the left eye, which is the eye that they show in the movie, and it often links to the moon. And I think it's really funny that they have this symbol be so central for the movie, and that they didn't fact check that detail.
Yeah, that's pretty hilarious.
Whoops.
Just a minor little whoopsie daisy.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just have one last thing. It's about Jay Davidson, who played Raw. It's like a whole thing, because, okay, so he was actually working as a fashion designer at the time and was offered a role on Edward II, I believe, and he took it because he just needed money. And that movie became like a huge sleeper hit. Like, it was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, and he was even nominated for Best Supporting Actor, and that was his first role ever. And then obviously they gave him the role of Raw, and he had such a difficult time on the set because he had to, like, obviously, like, speak as an ancient, or, you know, use ancient Egyptian and, like, do all these different things. And apparently he didn't know that his voice would be altered, you know, post-production. And after the first screening, Devlin, who was the writer, found him in tears. And when Devlin attempted to apologize, Davidson responded, "No, you saved me. Thank you." Because he thought his performance was just, like, god-awful before that. I know, poor guy. And then after Stargate, he's only ever acted, I think, in like 3 or 4 roles. And after Stargate, he just retired from acting because he just disliked the attention and fame, and he was not into it. And he returned to being a fashion assistant.
Understandable. Totally understandable. But it's sad because we didn't get more films with him. But I get it.
Just like, what a trajectory. Like, what a career. Like, just randomly just being like, yeah, I'll take this role, and then you get nominated for an Academy Award on your first try, and then you get to be this huge villain in this huge sci-fi movie, and then you're just like, nah, I'm good, and you just go back to just hanging out with and just being a fashion assistant and like modeling. Like, that's just wild. Like, that's good for him though.
Yeah. Can't believe he hated his performance though, because hello.
I know, we were praising it the whole time.
No, but good for him.
Yeah, okay, really quick, I just wanted to say this, and then I think I'm like tapped out. I don't think I have any more notes. But I just, like, I need to freaking say it because we need to just acknowledge that this happened. But Disney made Atlantis: The Lost Empire, I think, what is it, like 4 years later? Oh, sorry, 2001. Oh shit, it was like way later. Okay, never mind. But I mean, it was way later. Obviously after this movie came out, and honestly, it's a better movie, in my opinion, than the original Stargate movie. Honestly, if you want to watch a movie like that has the vibes of Stargate, honest to God, just watch Atlantis: The Lost Empire, or you can watch the whole franchise, honestly. But if you just want like a movie, I honestly think what I'm missing from this movie is what Atlantis: The Lost Empire gives me. And let me explain. I have receipts. It's like such a random tangent, but I just need to say this. We need to just acknowledge it.
Go off, Sam.
Okay, obviously we all know that Daniel Jackson or Milo Thatch is heavily, quote-unquote, inspired by Daniel Jackson. Cough, cough, ripped off, cough, cough. That man is just James Spader animated in that movie. He's so Daniel Jackson. But what I think the movie does best is, I mean, it has that sense of humor that this movie's just, I feel like it's missing, in my opinion. It has a sense of fun. It has a huge cast that, although they are like maybe quote unquote like gimmicky, I just feel like they are all endearing in their own ways. And it's diverse, okay? And I honestly think the best thing about the movie and how it improves on its sort of predecessor in a way is the character of Sha're, I'm gonna call her Sha're, versus Kida. I honestly think that the movie Atlantis just improves on the Kida / Sha're character just like tenfold. Because, okay, again, so all the like criticisms that we were loving, right? So Sha're can't really communicate with the team in the beginning, and then eventually, you know, she has a romance, and then, you know, she's like connected to the plot in some way. But I just think Kida is just so much better because she is like such like a strong character, and I think she is way more connected to the story than Sha're is. And I think her romance with Milo Thatch is like one of the best in Disney. Like, I feel like they're a very underrated Disney couple. Everyone is like so obsessed with them, or they should be. She's funny, she's like smart, and he's like the silly, goofy like nerd, and she's like the capable, strong princess that he's like, oh my god, I'm in love with you. They just have like a really sweet romance, and she's so connected to the story, just like, I don't want to spoil it, but like via like her mom, and like, you know, it's like a huge third act that she's very much a part of, and like the central point of the third act. And so I just have to put it out there that I honestly think Atlantis: The Lost Empire is a better movie and improves on a lot of the ideas of the original Stargate.
I will have to watch that.
And that's the tea.
Let me know if you guys agree. Well, I guess we can still in a way ask the question, so if they were to reboot the movies, would you be upset, intrigued? What do you guys think?
It's a good question, because it's a movie and it's one movie, and it's been 30 years. So it's not like it's a show that's, or like it has already like 5 sequels or something, or like movie-wise, it's just like, I think you can think of it as a standalone. Like, yes, SG-1 and all of Stargate goes off from there, but I don't know, I think it keeps like its individuality. And I think also because it's a different cast than in SG-1, I think if they made a reboot from the movie, I would not be opposed. Because it would be cool it might be cool to have like a modern version. But also I like this movie, and but I think I wouldn't like I would be okay with it, and I would probably watch it, and then make up my mind if I liked it or not. But I wouldn't like hate it just because it was like a reboot, if that makes sense. But I think for me it only works because it's like it's a different cast, and I'm not as emotionally attached with all the characters' faces. And yeah, might be interesting what it would look like if they made it today.
Honestly, my gut reaction to the thought of a remake of something that I like is to be like, no! And the reason for this is twofold. One, I really like the original actors in the film. And two, I don't have a lot of faith in modern day cinematic visuals where a lot of times, especially in this genre nowadays, we have a lot of washed out colors, a lot of gray, everything looks like dirty dishwater, and this movie is so colorful, and I just don't trust the modern film eye to make this film look as gorgeous as it did 30 years ago. However, I feel like in today's era of discourse surrounding remakes, the remake does not erase the original property. In fact, it draws attention to the original property. So, and the remake brings new eyes and a younger or fresher audience to an existing property. So, I feel like if they were to do a remake of the Stargate movie, I wouldn't hate it on the principle that it would most likely, even if it was bad, it's just more Stargate, which is always a nice thing to have. Because it has felt very forgotten these past years. And two, I feel like it would bring Stargate back into the public consciousness where people would go back, watch the original movie, watch the TV shows, and, you know, get to see how amazing Stargate is as an entire franchise. So, yeah, I would be okay with it.
Yeah, I think both of you guys summed up my exact thoughts. Yeah, I think I'd be fine with it, is the long-winded way of saying it. I just wonder, my thing is, do you think they would be impacted by the show in the sense that they would maybe want to like bring that tone into the movie, or do you think they would try to stick with their original premise of just like sort of straight adventure sci-fi? I don't know, because I just feel like a part of the reason why I don't think the film works is because of that lack of like whimsy, for better for a better word. I love how SG1 is just so whimsy, and it's just a thing that carries the franchise, and I think it defines the franchise and sets it apart from like every other sci-fi show out there almost. And so I really wonder like what direction they would have taken it. Because let me actually just sort of, since we're here, I'll just talk about the reboot. So actually, back in 2014, MGM and Warner Brothers had said they were going to greenlight a new Stargate film with the original creators, so Dean Devlin, who was the writer, and Roland Emmerich, who was the writer and the director. The first planned in a trilogy. So they were gonna ignore the characters and story and continuity of the 3 television series, and they were just gonna return to the 1994 film left off and reboot the story more than 20 years into the future. So it'd be like after like a new team maybe. However, back then in 2016, that's when Dean Devlin started to say that the film was like not looking good. There are just things that just were falling apart. And he basically said that, this is one of the reasons why I prefer to work independently. And he was just like, listen, I think if we did Stargate right, the fans would like it and we could do something really good. But if we screw it up, they'll reject it, as they should. But I kind of don't want to do it if I think we'll screw it up. And that's one of the things that's holding us back. And then eventually, back in 2018, he was like, I don't think I should ever work with studios. And last thing that he said recently in 2023, this is the producer, Dean Devlin, he said, it looked like we were going to reboot it from the beginning and do all 3 films, but that didn't happen. I think my run in Stargate is probably done at this point.
I remember this! Like, I was around the fandom when I don't know if I was around when they started with or like when they announced the reboot, but I remember when it was cancelled and I was sad. It's crazy because I don't know if you know this, but there are novelizations, or there's a novelization of the Stargate movie, and there are like 3 or 4 books that come afterwards. But I think they're called like Stargate Rebellion and Retaliation, maybe? I haven't read them yet, but I guess I don't know if they plan to make, like 30 years ago, if they plan to make more movies then, and they just never got made, but there is a continuation of the story of the movie, which is quite different, I think you can say, from what they did in the show. The show just, like, I feel like the show picked a few things and just ran with that, but I think the original vision was quite different, especially when it comes to the goa'uld. So yeah, it's crazy. And yeah, I agree with what Tor said earlier, that it would be cool to just have more Stargate that is accessible to the public and not like Stargate Origins, which I keep thinking about. Just to draw like attention to what we have. Maybe, but I also agree with that I don't trust modern filmmaking. I feel like there are like maybe 2 people who still make good movies and like know how to light stuff.
My thing is, right, okay, so earlier we were talking about like movies we can compare this to, right? And I mentioned Dune and Star Wars just like off the top of my head. Obviously they're not like direct comparisons. But now that I'm thinking about it, right? Okay. So if Stargate was made today, I don't know again if it would be able to find that, like, if it would be too middle of the road. And what I mean by that is, Dune is sort of like the opposite, not the opposite, but like on the opposite side of the spectrum, opposite, I guess I used the word eventually, of Star Wars, right? So like Dune is so like heavy, quote unquote, like politics and like grappling with like, the future and like death and I don't know, just like different things, like really high fantasies, like slash sci-fi, right, concepts. And then you have Star Wars, which is like goofy aliens, aliens dancing, like I don't know, like it's just like two different vibes. And I just wonder again, which is I think just again like just one of my issues with Stargate the movie is that I don't know if it would be too middle of the road, that again it wouldn't be able to find, it would sort of just fall into like a really niche group again and like not really reach both audiences, because it's not very that campy and it's not super politicky. They would have like people being like, really interested in like the world building. I mean, I'm sure there would be people interested in it, but I just don't know if it'd have that reach, because it's in the middle of like both these sort of popular, not franchises, but like popular sort of like themes and like vibes of the movies nowadays. I don't know. It's just kind of in the middle, and I don't know how that would do. Yeah, I mean, it is really unfortunate, I think, because, it's just like fun to sort of theorize and sort of imagine like what could have been if we had got those movies like back. 2014 is a decade ago at this point, right? Like if we would have been like we would have finished the trilogy by now, and who knows, maybe Stargate would have been back fully in the public's eye, maybe everyone would have been loving it, and who knows, maybe we would have gotten a fourth show, or maybe they would have rebooted the show or done something with it. So it is really unfortunate in that regard that like while I like the movie and while I think it's like a fun time, I think it's just unfortunate that we couldn't like see what else these two guys like had in mind for their trilogy and like for their version of Stargate, and sort of what it would have done for like just putting Stargate back into public eye. So that aspect, I'm like, oh man, MGM, you fuckers.
But I guess, maybe to wrap this up, it's also fair to say from the creator from the movie to say that he's afraid to disappoint the fans, because I feel like that's something that is happening, or like I think it has to happen. It's always happening. Like if there is a spin-off or a reboot, there are always fans who are disappointed. So I guess it's fair, but also maybe how little did you trust the project?
Yeah.
I didn't mean to drag them. I didn't start a sentence planning to drag. Opposite thing.
Fair.
It's fair. It's so fair. It's so fair. I kind of feel like if you go into something wanting to hate it, you're going to hate it, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like you'll find things to hate, just to justify your bias. So it's important, like you were just saying, for whoever is making the thing to just kind of shut out the outside noise and be like, no, this is going to be cool. I have such a cool idea. Let me do this. And yeah, it's kind of sad that he didn't have the faith or, the drive or the passion for the title to like do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, just crazy. Because 2014, what? Wasn't that the year SGU was cancelled? So it was like right when SGU... Or was it 2012 that SGU was cancelled? I get my dates mixed.
I think SGU ran from 2009 to 2011. So it was like 3 years later.
Okay.
It's been a while.
Yeah. That was like closer together. I was like, damn, like that would have been crazy. Like they canceled the universe and then like greenlit the trilogy. I mean, they greenlit it. It just never got off the ground, but they did greenlit, like the trilogy a few years later. So I feel like, there probably was people who like had maybe some hope that it would have like maybe brought back the franchise, and then it just did not end up happening, which is like really sad to think about.
Stargate, for me, it feels like the almost like franchise, because we almost got like more movies. We almost got a fourth show, and it just never happened. Like, the movies were greenlit, and about the fourth show, they were saying, oh, it's like 5 chevrons locked. That's pretty far in the process. So, anyways, I'm happy for what we have. Except Origins.
I have one fun fact about the creature that slobbered all over Daniel, if you guys want to know.
Yes, I love creatures.
So, clearly that was practical effects. It was actually played by an animal. 2 animals, in fact. So, this horse-like creature was played by an actual Sha're horse. So they had these, like, plastic frames to put around them, fur pants, and an animatronic head to put on the head of the animal, basically. And, every time they had to put it on the horse, they would have a crew of people to put it on them, and a truck with 2 cranes on it so that they could actually, like, get high enough to drop the costume pieces on it, because it was heavy stuff too. And because it was so heavy, the horses couldn't actually run with the stuff on. So instead, they made a miniature costume of the fictional animal and dressed dogs up in this miniature version. And so when you see these creatures running in the movie, they're actually dogs with the costume on. To look like these creatures.
I love you, practical effects.
Love that.
See, take me back. That's amazing. That's so genius.
The poor horses, though.
Yeah, I kind of feel bad for
I
them.
hope they were treated well.
Me too.
I know, in the heat.
Yeah, oh my god, you're right. Oof. Yeah.
Someone call Animal Protection Services
For
on
real.
that set, maybe.
But it looked so good. It looked so good. And it's, like, it still looks good.
I love that. That's so cute, dogs. I think, I don't know if we have to say, do you guys want to say overall impressions? I don't know. I think the overall impression is we all like it to varying degrees. And we just wanted to come together and sort of talk about the things we liked and disliked for the 30th anniversary. Just because, just in general, we love Stargate so much. And we always want to talk about. And hopefully we'll have more to talk about in the future.
Manifesting that. Yeah, no. Just seconding everything that Sam just said. It's just always fun. I think movie is fun. It's a fun time, even if it's a bit long sometimes. But I think it visually it definitely holds up, like to its age, and definitely worth it. And yeah, I think it's just a bit nostalgic for me, even though like I haven't been there. I wasn't alive when it came out, and it wasn't the first Stargate I watched, but it's what started it all, so it's important to me.
Yeah, it was really special for our Stargate Day episode for us to go back to the beginning, I think, and see what started it all, really. And kind of, it's like when a butterfly flaps its wings and it creates the hurricane or tornado or whatever they say. If they never made that film, we would not be here right now. I don't know if we would be friends right now, talking about this
God, yeah.
wonderful, wonderful series that brought us together. And so, yeah. Oh, I don't want to get emotional, but yeah. So, thank you to the Stargate movie for that.
It was perfect.
Yeah, that was what a way to end it on. So I won't talk anymore just to not ruin that. Of course, you can check out everything linked down below in our description box, including our social medias. You can see what we're up to during the week on our regular accounts, and you can also follow our Jumping Puddle accounts to see when we post new episodes and polls and memes occasionally. Thanks for hanging out with us today.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, you clowns, listen up. I don't often get a chance to say this, so savor it. Good work, boys and girls. Let's go home.